You have no idea what I've gone through to try to get here.
Oh, man.
I will get straight to the point.
Okay.
I have created a new philosophy, and I wish to present it to you. I will dispatch your arguments with alacrity. Would you like to hear it?
Yeah, go for it. Oftentimes for people to grasp ideas, I think they need to be somewhat intuitive probably. And then since I don't believe that morality is like a real thing, I think that a lot of it is kind of intuited. It's probably important that there is some intuitive foundation to any kind of moral system. Yeah.
Do you have any empirical evidence for that?
Empirical evidence that
Well, that
people...
was an empirical claim. You are suggesting that there is some sort of net benefit. And I must say, with all due respect, it appears that you have... Please tell Vouch about me.
Okay, that Deus guy's spamming me on Discord now.
Hey, that guy's probably mentally ill.
Yeah,
What does he want to argue
I'll
about?
pull him in.
I don't know, but New Salsa and Dumb my chat are like, oh, he wants to debate you, and then he's like not even in a chat,
I'm
so
gonna pull him in, hold on.
good luck.
I pulled him in once already.
All New Salsa does is salsa dance and talk about shoes.
Smoke crack.
What the f***, Mootin?
What?
Well, I didn't know that.
He doesn't actually. Alright, welcome Deus.
Sorry, I've never done this before, so...
we can tell.
Wait, hold on, real quick. Can you add a few more things to your Discord name, like a few more numbers and symbols?
Yes, that's a long story. Destiny, is this you?
That the one and only, yeah.
You have no idea what I've gone through to try to get here.
Oh man.
I will get straight to the point.
Okay.
I have created a new philosophy, and I wish to present it to you. I will dispatch your arguments with alacrity. Would you like to hear it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so my philosophy is best summarized in one axiom. You see, I have one primary axiom.
Uh-huh.
It is the preservation and expansion of possibilities. That is the only thing that should be striven for. And the reason why I say that is because the way that my philosophy works is you conceptualize all different kinds of phenomena as possibilities. So here's an example for how to use my moral system. You have say you're in a white room, and the only choice you can make is whether or not to smash a ladybug. Are you following?
I'm following.
Okay. So, when you do that, when you decide whether or not to do that, to be clear, this is the only choice you can make, and the purpose of this hypothetical is to just illustrate how my system works. So when you decide to do that, you consider which choice precludes the least amount of possibilities.
Okay.
And to be clear, a possibility, as defined by my system, is just something that can happen, of which there is empirical evidence for. So, for example, a rock flying into space with no physical forces acting on it, that is not a possibility because there's no empirical evidence for that. Do you get my definition of possibilities?
Yeah, things that can happen.
Okay, so there are less possibilities precluded if you don't smash the ladybug versus if you did. Because once you smash the ladybug, it cannot be reassembled in the same way that it was smashed, which is why, in the past, I have referred to possibilities as vectors of change. Do you follow this so far?
Yep.
Okay, so, Destiny, I was wondering if you have any objections to this, do you? Or would you like me to elaborate more?
I mean, I understand it. I don't know what the point is, but I understand what you're saying.
Oh, what do you mean by point? My point is that I believe this system is superior to your rules-based utilitarianism. Yes. And I've also reviewed your writings on the matter, and I think your language is a bit promising.
Well, so when you say, would you, real quick, here's a question. When you say superior, what do you mean by superior?
As in, you can make moral decisions much more effectively.
Yeah,
and
effectively, what do you mean by effectively?
I mean along your parameters, and I must say that I am not completely aware of what is in your mind, obviously. But when I say superior, I just mean that I think you would consider it superior if you adopted it. For example, rules-based systems like the one that you have for morality actually do not work that very well. And I consider an appropriate analog to be how AI works. For example, some AI's rules-based, they don't function as effectively versus ones that employ something called machine learning, which are just given a goal, and then how they approach it, that is much more freeform. So my system is not rules-based because
I mean, to be clear, like ML stuff is just using a different process to develop rules, right? Like, it's still rules.
Yes,
yeah.
There's still an operating system.
Yeah, when it's still rules, right? It's just a different way by which you develop the rules. But
Yeah, but not really, because some
Yeah,
just
exactly.
depend on the
Right.
rule.
It's exactly the same thing, right? Yeah. You can either
Sorry,
write
my
rules
audio.
to do something like very simply, or you can use like a machine learning process to develop potentially a more sophisticated set of rules. But at the end of the day, they're all just a set of rules, right?
I see what you're saying, but my philosophy is more like the latter approach.
Okay,
So
sure.
forgive my poor phrasing on the matter.
It's okay.
But do you see what I'm saying? For example,
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I still don't know why I would ever follow such a system. Like, I don't know why, like, just because there's more possibilities, there might be a lot of possibilities that would result in harm to me that I wouldn't be okay with, so why would I want to do that?
well, could you give an example of one? Of, say,
Sure,
a scenario
let's say
where you
that
want less possibilities?
I'm in a room and I'm playing video games and I could do that all day for every day, or I could take a hammer and like smash open my hand and crush it, and then also continue to play video games all day every day. Like that's an added possibility. That's a lot
Yes,
more stuff.
but when I talk about possibilities, I'm talking about much. I'm talking about much more than just like your conventional sense of it. For example, if you were to smash your hand, you actually are diminishing your possibilities because your hand is smashed, the flesh is gone, lots of the cells are dead.
Well,
All
but you're
kinds of
opening
other
up
things.
so many more
Hmm?
possibilities too, though. You got to be opening up amazing possibilities for infection. You could be opening up possibilities for new experiences, like the pain you'd experience feeling it. You might get
Yes.
new perspectives on things. Like there's a whole bunch more possibility there, and you could have already
Yes,
gotten all the
but here's
possibilities
the-
in life from playing games.
Oh, yes, but here's the key difference. When you talk about possibilities, remember that my definition is something that can happen. So here's the thing. When you describe smashing your hand with a hammer, there's already empirical evidence that you can do that. So actually doing it, you're just actualizing certain possibilities.
Yeah, but
But
the
you aren't actually
actualization of
creating any more.
the actualization of something is different than just the possibility of something, of course, right?
Yes, but the way I define possibility, something that can happen, your goal is to preserve and expand the ones that are empirically verifiable to happen. So, for example, when you have new technology or other things, you are expanding possibilities because there's now empirical evidence that you can do something that you couldn't do previously. For example, say take a conventional scenario where you gather more knowledge. I consider this would be considered expanding possibilities because there's not much empirical evidence that a particular individual can do a certain thing. So, but if you learn more and you actually are aware of certain courses of action, you do increase your possibilities. But as you said, actualizing them is different. So no, smashing your hand with a hammer isn't necessarily increasing your possibilities because all of the ones that you just described, they're all empirically verifiable. But when you smash your hand, you're actually diminishing some simply because you cannot undo it. And there's a technique that I developed in order to aid understanding. Would you like to hear what the technique is?
Sure. I mean, I don't agree with your explanation given thus far. I mean, like,
Oh, what do you disagree with then?
I think that there are new experiences to be gained by crushing your hand just because you haven't, or just because you, I just, the way that you're hand waving it, you can try to explain it one more time, but like, I don't, like, crushing your hand isn't necessarily a permanent thing either. Like, it is going to be the case that one person that crushes his hand and plays video games and then heals is going to have had more experiences and more possible experiences open to them than the person that didn't. I don't know how you can hand wave all that away. If you can explain that again if you want.
Because there's already empirical evidence that all of those things can occur. So whether
Yeah, but
or not
empirical
you
evidence
do-
is not the actual physical sensation of, right? There is new knowledge gained and new experience and possibility opened by experiencing a particular thing, right? Or do you disagree
I
with
see. I think I went a bit too fast. No. My point was with a knowledge example. I was just explaining how you could describe that. Did you say something I couldn't hear?
that? Nope.
Okay. My point was that was just an example of how that could be considered expanding possibilities because there's no empirical evidence that you can or can't do something if you don't even know about it. For example, depending on the individual, there are statistics that you can appeal to, but there's more specialized empirical evidence per individual. And by the way, when I say empirical, I largely mean observational. Some definitions differ. Some include, for example, replicability, but others do not. Anyway, back to what you were saying. With the smashed hand thing, I see how you think it is hand waving, which that was a funny joke, by the way. But it's not hand waving because all of the experiences you just listed are ones that are already empirically verifiable to happen. Like, you have an idea of what can happen when you smash your hand. And also, my point is that, yes, it isn't... what I mean by it not being reversible is that it still takes time to, say, fix your hand or other things. Even with modern technology, there's no guarantee that your hand will be restored to exactly its previous state. So my point is not that you are causing irreparable physical damage to yourself. My point is that doing any action is irreversible in the sense of, say, entropy, which entropy, by the way, is considered responsible for the arrow of time and with our current understanding of physics. But what I mean by reversible, it's much more general, has to do with time. So that's what I mean by reversible. As in, you already spent that time to smash your hand, you can't get that time back. Does that make more sense? Or does
Yeah,
it
sure.
still
I
seem
guess
like
so.
a
In
way?
terms of how you've heard me discuss morality, can you give me an example of something that like your system would do that like mine wouldn't, that yours would provide like a superior answer for?
Yes, well, the way I've applied my system, I haven't written about this much. My works are mainly in notes right now, but it is very useful because you can use it for situations. For example, I remember this one stream that you had. You were discussing your utilitarian perspective, and you state, and remember the example with organs, why you shouldn't kill one person if they can preserve the lives of two people. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And the reasoning you gave was that, well, first of all, if we had a society that could do that, then no one would go sleep in hospitals or anything. Well, here's the key weakness with that. My guess with your utilitarianism is that you wish to maximize experience. I remember you writing that down.
Yeah, one's own experience, sure.
Would you include happiness as part of that?
Yeah, whatever vaguely we would define as like utility, yeah.
Okay, well, here's the problem. When you describe that particular phenomenon, the societal effects of permitting one person to be killed or any amount of people to be killed because it would save a greater amount of people, you're appealing to factors alien to your system. And what I mean by that is that, say, if your only goal is happiness, and whatever metrics you use in order to best gauge what happiness is, you are necessarily excluding other variables. And the reason why this is bad is because, say, for example, if as technology advances, you could say create sedative drugs or other things that would allow people to be okay with existing and functioning in society and not responding in the adverse ways that you described in your hypothetical. But the reason why my system doesn't have that problem is because possibilistically there is an inherent diminution of possibilities. And for example, I've used a very similar example to yours. I must say that it was inspired by this very discussion. Are you following me so far, by the way, or is there anything that you wish to point out?
I don't follow you at all. I don't understand how developing an anesthetic somehow breaks the example that I brought up.
All right, then. My point is that if your goal is to maximize happiness, and depending on whatever metric you use in order to best quantify happiness, you can do certain things to exclude certain variables in order to get more happiness. So what I meant by the aesthetics is that, say, you have sedated people or genetically modified them. So if they do witness such a thing happening, as in one person can be killed to save the lives of two, you can make it so people no longer respond to that behavior, because ultimately you would still be maximizing happiness. You can just modify people's dispositions so that there won't be that kind of response. So it incentivizes a sort of exclusion of variables that can become more and more realistic as technology advances. Do you see what that means?
So you're saying that at some point we could reprogram people so that things that I currently consider bad, they wouldn't consider bad, and then it would change the way that people interact with each other in society or make new things possible that I probably wouldn't want to be possible?
Exactly. It would make following a singular goal of happiness, it would make it easier to exclude other things that you would currently consider bad, and it would eliminate the justification that you gave for not doing that, which is as the effects simply wouldn't be good because people would be afraid. But you could. My point is that you couldn't change that. So yes.
I mean, if that happens at some point, then I guess that's just something that I deal with then. I mean, like, I don't...
Yeah, but my system accounts for that, and here's why.
Well, what if in your
following me so far?
system, what if somebody were to modify people so that they didn't actually want more possibilities to exist? Wouldn't that break your system?
No, it wouldn't, because that's against my system's goal. The system's goal is to preserve and expand possibilities. And if you genetically modify people to not prefer possibility, that's very that's antithetical to what my system is. But it's not but my example, that's not antithetical to your system because you're still maximizing happiness. If anything, you've furthered that goal because you've been able to exclude the variables that would cause certain practices to be viewed as disfavorable.
Gotcha. Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
So anyway, would you like an example of how when my system applied to your example necessarily precludes that kind of behavior?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so say you have, and I also have a Reddit post about this. I have some supplementary reading materials. I'll send them to you after the debate if you're interested. Anyway, forgive me for digressing. Okay, so say you have 10 people in a room, and to make this analysis simpler, let's just say that they're in a white room, and nothing else is affected by this other than the 10 people dying or the one person dying. So this is a highly tortured example. This isn't even considering anything in the real world. But to maximize possibilities in this situation, well, first of all, and I'm going to develop this example, but I'm just starting at the bare minimum to walk you through it so you can get a better idea of how my system functions. So in this scenario, the one person dying would preclude possibilities because living implies all sorts of things, but once you're dead, there's no empirical evidence that a person can come back to life, and even then, as I stated earlier, of time entropy, you can't really reverse certain decisions. But anyway, I digress. So the problem when we talk about these situations is that we label things as moral or immoral, but there isn't. Are you following so far, or is it getting a bit off topic? Because I can be more specific if.
Nope, I'm following you. Go for it.
Okay. So the problem when we address these situations is that we label something as moral or immoral with these hypotheticals, which is one reason why I have objected to them in the past. But ultimately, the labeling doesn't really matter. What matters is the implications of such labeling. So in this highly tortured example, with a white room, nothing else affected, the only thing that changes is whether or not 10 people die or live, depending on whether or not the organs of one person are harvested. To maximize possibilities in this situation, the best choice would be to allow the person to... This is assuming that the only way the 10 people dying can be prevented is by harvesting organs from one person. There are no other options, to be clear. The best option, possibilistically, would be to allow the 10 to live, and allow them all to live until the very last moment when the 10 are about to die. It would then be acceptable to harvest the organs from the one person. But that's only because there's no other... And even then, saying it's acceptable doesn't really matter, because ultimately when you label something as immoral or moral, the point is the implications. But there really isn't any utility in conceiving of things this way. And the reason why I call out your rules-based system is because if you look at this hypothetical, you then derive a rule from it to apply to other similar situations. But my point is that isn't how you do that. My system is highly situational. So now, let's take that very same scenario and put it in the real world, introducing all other variables possibilistically. So, back to the example. You have 10 people in the real world and one person, and the 10 people will die unless they get organs. And the one person can provide the organs. Killing the one person to provide organs for the 10 people would preclude more possibilities than other options, simply because, as you know, death itself, it is a diminution possibilistically. And there are other options in the real world. So in my system, no matter even if the one person is okay with being killed to save the 10 people or other things, possibilistically, there are much better options. And by better, I just mean there are options that preclude less possibilities than if you killed the one person. So do you see how that would work?
Sure.
I can walk you
less
through...
possibilities. I got it. Yep.
So, Any objections so far? I wish to address them because if I just keep going on, it's not really addressing the heart of the matter. So, are you beginning to understand how the system works more?
think I've got it.
Okay. So, what do you think so far?
It seems interesting, I guess. I don't know where I would ever apply this in any actual scenario outside of like worrying that people are going to genetically modify people in the future to have different preferences or whatever.
Or I'm going to send you some of my writings on this if you wish. But why do you think this is hard to apply?
I just think it's pointless to apply. I think that intuitively most people don't think of what is good or bad in this way. And I think that it would be difficult for me to get to some answers using this type of system as well. It would have to make me consider a lot of things that
being intuitive to be a net benefit.
Oftentimes for people to grasp ideas, I think they need to be somewhat intuitive probably. And then since I don't believe that morality is like a real thing, I think that a lot of it is kind of intuited. It's probably important that there is some intuitive foundation to any kind of moral system. Yeah.
Do you have any empirical evidence for that?
Empirical evidence that
Well, that was
people...
an empirical claim. You are suggesting that there is some sort of net benefit. And I must say, with all due respect, it appears that you have... Actually, no, not yet. Anyway, yes, was an empirical claim you made. You're claiming that a moral system needs to have an intuitive foundation in order to function well, but you just appealed to your own experience. So I'm just wondering what your reasoning is for this.
Well, my reasoning is I don't believe that moral fact exists, yet people still confidently talk about things that they consider to be moral fact. And if moral fact doesn't exist, and people are still talking about it, then it must be something that they've intuitively arrived at, unless there is some other source of moral fact that people get when they speak of morality. Maybe you know that source.
I find this reasoning a bit strange, please forgive me, but that doesn't really establish whether or not one system is more beneficial than another.
We're not trying to establish that right now. I'm just trying to establish that I feel like people intuitively reason a lot of their morality. They don't do it in a cognitive sense. That's all I'm trying to get to right now.
Even if they do, that doesn't mean that it's the best option or that it's the only one that people can do.
No, but that would be the next step of my argument if I have you on board with that. If I have you on board with the idea that most people intuitively do it, and we agree with that, then the next part of my argument would...
No, you don't. The reason why is because this is largely an empirical question, and I do not think it is appropriate to prax our way out of this.
I don't understand what you mean by that.
Oh, prax. Have you ever heard of praxology? Praxology, it's kind of what we're both doing if we both decide to agree on this. You see, it's using deductive logic applied to individuals. I use the word... My enthusiasm is largely in economics. It was largely interesting in mine. So if you research praxology or anything, it's just largely what we're doing, just reasoning our way through it without any evidence. But the reason why I reject this approach, even though it is something that we could do and something that is routinely done in this format especially, but I just wouldn't grant it to you.
Sure, that's fine. So then where do you think that most people get their moral reasoning from, if not intuitively? What is your alternative? What are you suggesting?
I see what you're saying, but it's just more complicated than to just call it intuitive. I have a book that you may be interested in.
Well, I clearly don't have the ability to read an entire book right now, so you're going to have to do your best to summarize it for me, right?
I see. So for the sake of this conversation, I see your point. So I think I will grant to you that, yes, lots of it is intuitive. But the fact that that's how it is done now doesn't necessarily mean that another system that doesn't function like that wouldn't work.
Can you give me an example at any point in human history of any group of people following an unintuitive moral system correctly or successfully?
Well, first of all, I think we need to be more specific in our definitions because there are legal systems there are lots of aspects of legal systems that aren't necessarily intuitive, but there are laws still passed that are done so because they recognize certain human behaviors.
Sure, so law and legality is going to be an abstraction of a lot of different people's moral systems coming together under some sort of like legal framework. So I'm trying to stay away from those types of abstraction. I'm just looking at the very fundamental level. I'm curious if there's an example of like some group of people.
The reason why I point that out is because lots of people, not all, but many people, do consider breaking laws to be immoral.
That's great, but I'm not. This is obfuscating the issue. I'm just trying to find a group of people that we can think of that all follow an unintuitive moral system, something that they have to stop and think about, where they're like, oh, like this particular thing, I thought this was good, but this is actually really bad. This is a very unintuitive moral system. I'm curious if that type of moral system is ever employed by people.
Well, there are times when people make decisions that they would doubt, and lots of it has to do with the fact that of the reality of certain specialized situations. Would you not agree? My
That
point
was
is
so
that my
vague,
moral
such that
system
I
is
don't know
designed-
what I'm supposed to take from that. Yeah, go ahead.
My point in stating this is that when you encounter a very specialized moral situation, many people do makes that far easier.
Okay.
Are you aware of, say, do I need to give an example of that? Or I think we're both aware that when it comes to very specialized, because here's the thing. One of the reasons why my system is likely going to be much more easy than, say, an intuitive moral system is because the rate at which technology is advancing and the rate at which change is occurring in society is far more than anywhere else in human history. In fact, in economics, it's called the hockey stick of human history because things are growing so fast now and more so than ever before. So we are increasingly reaching more and more situations where people don't know what to do in certain situations due to new technology and other things. For example, the morality of genetic engineering. And for example, there are all kinds of things that are done simply because people aren't comfortable with them. For example, people are beginning to discuss AI, and even AI is nowhere near, by the way, a general AI. So I must state that my point is not that we need to do this for AI, but there are situations, plenty of them, where when we discuss certain hypotheticals, people won't even consider certain approaches because of how intuitively uncomfortable they are. Do you grant this?
Yeah, of course.
So my system is primarily designed to deal with this.
Okay.
Would you like an example of how I would apply it?
Sure, hit us up with one. Sure, go ahead. Give us one example.
Okay, so one thing that I remember coming across was, say, the ability to simulate human brains. And people are becoming more worried about simulating them because, say, if you have a simulation of a human brain, is it really human or not if, say, you do that? So, say, should we torture one in order to get more data about the way that human brains respond to pain? Would this be ethical? That's a situation that many people would find a bit perplexing. Would you agree with this?
Sure. Yes, yeah. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the way you'd apply my system to that is you try to design a policy, because ultimately, here's the thing. Even though we're both talking about moral systems, ultimately what matters is the foundations that underlie them. Because ultimately morality is reflected, or at least attempted to be reflected, in law. So they aren't exactly neatly separable. So what you do using my system is you design a policy to minimize that while also preserving possibility. Because, for example, there are times when things that usually aren't done have to be done because someone else will do it. For example, there's empirical evidence that war and more violence has actually resulted in more peaceful societies because is allowed for the expansion of rules that allow for peace to prevail. And the reason why I bring this up, forgive me if it seems a bit scattered, but the reason why I bring this up is because there are certain things that need to be done because there's no choice. So, for example, if you were to simply ban people having artificial simulations of brains on their computers because you're worried about them being tortured, then whatever data you could get is completely excluded. But if someone else tries to do it and uses the data in order to gain an advantage against you and eventually take over your society, eventually as we know from history, it's going to be done anyway. But the problem with that is that because no one addressed it, it leads to chaos and misery. Are you beginning to understand what I'm saying? So the reason why you look at things through possibility is because it allows you to make the best decision that you can in your given situation, regardless of whether or not it may be intuitive. And by best, I simply mean the one, and by best, I'm largely appealing to your sense of best. And you see why I'm doing this? Because I do not have a sentimental justification for this system, and I do have sentiments behind it, which I have written about. But I haven't really attempted to justify it because all I can do is offer the product and explain how my system works. Are you following so far?
Yep,
Because
I got
think
it.
I may have been.
No, we're good. Okay, let's let's wrap it up. Let's get to the end of this.
Okay. So, do you have any? What are your objections so far, then?
I can't think of any. I'll consider it in my spare time. Okay.
Oh, really? Well, if you are willing, I would love to have a more formalized debate. Would you be up for that? You see, I enjoy many different fields. I also like economics. For example, I actually do. While we're at it, I do take issue with one of your economic positions. I'd say that is one of your views concerning the political economy. May I talk about that really quickly?
Yeah. What's that?
Okay, so I remember you noting one time on stream that you were talking about campaign donations with, I think it was Mike from PA.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you remember this? And when he was talking to you about campaign, I may be wrong, by the way, I may be misremembering, but he was talking to you about campaign donations. One of the things you said that caught my attention was you said, well, here's the thing, they only give about a few $1,000s, but so why would you think that they're getting this many benefits from that? Do you remember what I'm talking about? By any
Yeah,
chance?
sure. Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the thing. In economics, this is actually a documented paradox. There's a paradox that economics cannot explain so far, why it doesn't take nearly as much money to pay off politicians as it does to get the benefits. But that isn't empirical evidence against the fact that politicians can be bought off in the way that Mike from PA was pointing out. So I must state that, forgive me, but I think your position on that is not as empirically sound as it may seem based on the reasoning you presented.
Okay. I'll reconsider that. Okay.
Oh, really? Oh, well, thank you. I must state, please forgive me, I must say that I'm very, very excited. I must say that I enjoy watching you.
Okay.
But thank you. I'm just glad that I was able to detail some of my system to you and to your viewers as well. I am currently writing a paper about my philosophy. Would you like me to DM it to you? It will make much more sense, I believe.
You can post on my subreddit. Okay.
On your subreddit. Or actually, here's the problem. My karma isn't high enough, and my comments have been removed because I was trying to contact you, and the moderators didn't really like that, so I can't post on your subreddit because my karma isn't high enough.
Well, get that karma up. Okay. I believe in you. You can do it.
All right. I must say, I have a quick question. It's very important that I collect feedback, so I was wondering, what have you taken from this debate?
It's just a conversation that I'm listening to, and that's, yeah.
And by debate, I'm sorry, that was a colloquialism. What do you take from this conversation?
It's just been an interesting conversation. I think that's really all I can say.
Oh, okay. Well, I must say that I am a streamer, so I'd love to have a more formalized debate with you. Okay. Would you agree to this?
Maybe at some point, yeah. I don't know what my schedule looks like right now, but...
All right, then. By the way, please tell Vaush about me. I have a few issues with him on economics.
Gotcha. You should email the Modern Day Debate guy. They usually host people that have a conversation, so...
Will you DM me the contacts? Because I've had a lot of trouble contacting other streamers. And also, I've DM'd Vaush and everything, but it's just very difficult to get to contact them.
Okay. I'll see if I can pass that information along, okay?
I appreciate that, Destiny.
All right. Bye.
Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.
That's just, this is a sample of, the types of DMs I get. so that you understand what I mean.